What's up guys, Isaac here with RSG Offroad today. I got my buddy Bailey, he's a tech here. Bailey, what are we going to be doing today?
Today we're going to be installing some RSG Metalworks skid plates on this 5th gen 4Runner.
And to prove it to you that they fit on every 5th gen trim, we're going to be installing these on Unlimited. So let's get to it.
So to remove the factory stuff, what we'll use is a little impact gun, a small extension, a 14mm socket, a 12mm socket, a 10mm socket, and a trim panel tool. First thing is we're going to use a little trim panel tool, and we're going to use this to pop out all the little plastic clips holding these little like air ducts on the skid plate off. So we'll just kind of sneak in there, get this under there. So next we're gonna remove this, and on this little plastic skid here, these clips almost always break coming out all the time. So don't feel bad if these break. And I'm just gonna get up under there, and I'm kinda gonna do like a twist back and forth. And we got lucky, and that one came out in one piece. And then another, get in there and twist it, kind of back and forth. And then once you twist it like that, you'll have two more up here. So this is the last plastic skid plate we'll have to pull. So what I'll do, I'll use a 10mm socket. I like this little 1/4" gun because it's easy to get into these tight spots. And then just a little, the same trim tool as before to pull this little plastic clip out of there. So now we're on to the metal skid plates that we'll remove. All you'll need for this is a 12mm on an impact gun, and you'll have 4 bolts for each skid plate, and then they'll be off. Next thing we'll do is we'll pull these radiator supports with a 14mm socket. We don't have to reuse any of this stuff we're taking off. Now that we got all the factory stuff off, it's time to start putting on the new skid plates. So let's get to it. To install this front skid plate, all we'll need a 19mm ratcheting wrench for those rear bolts, a ratchet, an extension, and a 13 and a 17mm socket for the front half of the bolts. I'm using a tranny jack today to help me hold it up while I get the bolts started. You could also use a friend or even a floor jack if you got one, but it's definitely nice to have something help you hold it while you get the bolts started. The first bolts I always start with, get one of these big ones in the back corner and one of these big 17s in the front corner. That way you can have the weight held up while you get the rest of the bolts going in there the right way and everything lined up the way it should be. So the orientation you'll do this, you'll put this up through the skid plate, and then on top of the cross member, you'll put this washer with a 19mm nut on the top of it, just like that. Next thing I'll do, I'll get one of these 17mm in the front half of the skid plate. That way I don't need a jack to help hold up the weight anymore. We don't need anything tight yet, just tight enough to hold it up there. Then we'll get the jack out of our way. Then from there, just kind of go in from the front to the back. The front does switch out from 17s and 13s, so switch up the socket, get the 13s in there, go back to a 17 and get our middle bolts in. Then we'll put that last back long bolt in the cross member. Since this one here is a limited, we're not going to be putting these pieces back on at all. So you can throw those pieces away, and we're going to end up actually modifying this one a little. Or RSG Metalworks also makes a really nice fitting piece. It's a metal piece to replace this here if you're interested in that as well. It always helps too. You just get the little clip out of your way. Where you don't hit it. And just walk it down. Once you get it off, it's always nice if you sand it up a little bit. So now that we got this all trimmed up, or if you have the RSG Metalworks version of this, you'll just go ahead, line this up where it lines up with the front of the skid. Start those little 10mm bolts. Then I'm going to tighten up these two little 10mm bolts holding the plastic in. If you just ordered the front skid, this will wrap that part up of it, but we're going to jump into the rear skid now. For that rear skid, all we'll need to use is a 14mm ratcheting wrench. Make sure it's a ratcheting wrench. It'll take you forever if you don't have a ratcheting one. And then a short 19mm socket on a ratchet. So the first part of doing this rear skid is we're gonna put in this little protector that keeps your cats from getting stolen. And by doing that, you're gonna wanna look at it this orientation, and the small bolt is gonna go on this side, and the long bolt is gonna go on this side through that little cross member right there. So we're gonna feed the long bolt through the outer side, and the little bit shorter one through the inside. Just like that. And then we're gonna hold it up while we get the nuts started on the other side. Now that I got those bolts hand tight, I'm gonna use a 14mm wrench and tighten those up. Now that we got those tightened up, we're ready to put the skid on. I got the transmission jack helping me hold this up while I get the bolts started again. And one thing to definitely take note of is the front skid is gonna overlap the rear skid, and that's also gonna help rocks just travel along without getting caught up against anything. But I'm gonna start getting a bolt in the front lined up. Then once you get a bolt in the front, you know it ain't going anywhere, put one in the back. Kind of like the rest of the carriage bolts we've been using, when we join this front skid to the rear skid, we're gonna go through both skids with the carriage bolt, put a washer on top of that, and then a nut on top of that. So on these rear bolts, it's kind of like the rear bolts of the front skid. You're gonna put this like long bolt through the cross member, and then at the top of the cross member, you're gonna use a washer and then the nut on top of that. Now Now that we got everything in that rear skid all hand tight, we're gonna use a 14mm wrench and a ratchet with a 19mm socket to tighten everything up. And I always start with these back bolts here, and you kind of just gotta find the spot that you can get in there and tighten them up. So after I tighten up all these, the last thing to do, give it a couple taps, make sure you don't hear anything rattling or anything that sounds funky. And if it sounds good, you know you're good to go.
All right, by the looks of it, that was a fairly easy, clean-cut install. Is that right?
That is right. Basically, we took off the old ones, put on the front and rear skids, and now you're on your way.
You got good protection, plus they look way better than the cruddy old plastic, thin sheet metal skids.
100%.
Cool.
You could call it insurance.
You can call it insurance. Well, cool. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next time.